My name is Megan Carter, 32, and I still wake up in cold sweats remembering the day my father abandoned my little sister Lily at O'Hare Airport. She'll learn a lesson, he said, driving away with me sobbing in the back seat. I begged him to turn around, but his eyes in the rearview mirror were stone cold. I was only 14 and terrified for my 8-year-old sister left alone in the terminal. That moment changed everything between us. What my father didn't realize was that he'd be the one learning the harshest lesson when karma finally caught up with him. If you've ever experienced that moment, when you realize a parent isn't who you thought they were, this story might resonate with you. I'm sharing my family's darkest chapter, in hopes it helps someone else feel less alone. Before we dive deeper into what happened that day at O'Hare and the years of aftermath, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If family drama stories like mine help you process your own experiences, consider subscribing for more real-life accounts of family conflicts and how we survived them. Before I explain exactly what happened at the airport that day, you need to understand my father, Robert Carter. On the surface, he was a successful business executive in Chicago, with a beautiful home in the suburbs and 2 daughters. But beneath that polished exterior was a man obsessed with control, especially after my mother Elizabeth died. Mom's cancer took her when I was 10, and Lily was just 4. She'd been our buffer, the one who softened Dad's edges and translated his harshness into something we could understand as love. Without her, his true nature emerged unfiltered. What started as structure and discipline quickly revealed itself as something more troubling. Dad's philosophy was simple. Children needed to be toughened up for the real world. His favorite phrase was, "Life doesn't give second chances," usually said right before delivering some unnecessarily harsh punishment. When I was 12, I missed my curfew by 15 minutes because my friend's mom was running late. Instead of accepting my explanation, Dad made me walk 3 miles home in the rain. "Next time you'll plan better," he said, watching me leave in the downpour. Lily suffered worse because she was naturally more spirited and less able to anticipate his triggers. Once, when she was 6, she didn't clean her room to his standards. I came home from school to find her sobbing because Dad had thrown away all the toys left on her floor. Not donated, thrown away. These weren't just any toys, but special ones Mom had given her. When I tried to comfort her, Dad said I was enabling weakness. If there was one thing that triggered Dad more than anything else, it was tardiness. 5 minutes late to dinner? No dinner. Late for school? Grounded for a week. His obsession with punctuality ruled our lives. His watch constantly checked, his jaw tightening at the slightest delay. The summer I turned 14, Dad reluctantly agreed to take us to visit our maternal grandmother Patricia in San Francisco. He'd always disliked Mom's family, claiming they were too soft and filled Liz's head with nonsense. But after 4 years of minimal contact, Patricia had insisted, even offering to pay for our flights. In the weeks leading up to the trip, Dad wielded it as leverage. If your grades slip, we're not going. If I hear about any behavior problems, the trip is canceled. If your rooms aren't perfect every day, forget California. The threat hung over us constantly. The night before our flight, disaster struck. Lily, excited about seeing the grandmother she barely remembered, was bouncing around the house, despite my attempts to keep her calm. While Dad was in the shower, she went into his room and spotted his expensive watch on the dresser. She'd often seen him checking it and decided to practice telling time like Dad. Somehow, she dropped it, cracking the face. When Dad discovered the damage, his face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen. He didn't yell, which was somehow worse. He just looked at Lily with such cold disappointment that she started crying immediately. "We'll discuss this tomorrow," was all he said before disappearing into his office for the night. The next morning, the tension was unbearable. Dad barely spoke as we loaded the car with our luggage. Lily kept looking at me with anxious eyes, and I tried to reassure her with smiles and whispers that everything would be okay. Inside, though, I was terrified about what form Dad's punishment would take. "Be perfect," I whispered to Lily as we approached the airport. "Just be absolutely perfect today." She nodded solemnly, her small hand clutching mine, as we followed Dad through the parking garage. I didn't know then that perfect wouldn't be enough. Nothing would have been enough that day. O'Hare Airport was bustling with summer travelers when we arrived. Dad checked his damaged watch repeatedly, his jaw set in that way that signaled his anger was still simmering. I kept a firm grip on Lily's hand, whispering reminders to stay close and be quiet. American Airlines, Terminal 3, Dad muttered, more to himself than to us. He strode ahead with our carry-on bags, expecting us to keep up without being told. Lily was trying so hard to be good, but her natural 8-year-old energy made it difficult. She kept pointing at things, tugging my arm when she saw a shop with candy or a funny poster. "Megan, can I get a magazine for the plane?" she whispered. "Not today," I said gently. "Dad's not in a good mood." The check-in process went smoothly until the agent asked about our seating preferences. "The three of you aren't seated together," she said, frowning at her computer. "I can try to fix that, but it might take a few minutes." I saw Dad's shoulders tense. "We're fine separate," he said curtly. "Sir, your daughters are minors. The 8-year-old needs to be seated with an adult." "Fine," he snapped. "Do what you need to do." The extra 10 minutes it took felt like hours as Dad silently fumed. By the time we headed to security, his patience was clearly wearing thin. The line was long, and Lily started fidgeting almost immediately. "Stand still," Dad hissed, and she froze instantly. We were halfway through the security line when Lily tugged on my sleeve. "Megan," she whispered urgently, "I really need to go to the bathroom." I looked ahead at Dad, who was placing his items in the security bin. "Can you wait until we get through?" I asked. She shook her head, doing a little dance that made it clear this was urgent. "I can't hold it." I tapped Dad's shoulder. "Dad, Lily needs the bathroom. Really badly." He closed his eyes briefly, as if summoning patience. "We're almost through security." "I don't think she can wait," I said, seeing Lily's distress. The TSA agent called Dad forward. "Sir, please step through." Dad turned to me, his voice low. "Take her after we get through, quickly." We rushed through security as fast as possible, and Dad pointed to the nearest restroom. 5 minutes, he said, checking his watch. "Our gate is B17. Meet us there." I hurried Lily into the bathroom, but what should have been quick turned into a small disaster. First, there was a line. Then, once in the stall, Lily accidentally dropped her sweater in a puddle on the floor. Finally, she became fascinated by the automatic soap dispensers, playing with them until her hands were covered in a mountain of foam. "Lily, stop! Dad's waiting," I pleaded, trying to rinse the soap off her hands. "But it's fun, Megan. Look how much it gives you." "Dad will be really angry if we're late," I said, my anxiety mounting as I checked my watch. We were already 7 minutes in. "He's always angry anyway," she muttered, but finally let me dry her hands. We rushed to gate B17, my heart pounding. Dad was standing there, his face a mask of controlled fury. The boarding announcement had just started. "Where were you?" he demanded. "It's been 15 minutes. There was a line. And then Lily's sweater fell. And the soap. "I don't want excuses," he cut me off. He turned to Lily, who was slightly breathless from our rushed walk. "Do you understand what responsibility means, Lily? It means thinking about other people, not just yourself. It means respecting other people's time." Lily's lower lip trembled as people around us pretended not to notice the public scolding. "I'm sorry, Daddy," she whispered. "Group 3 now boarding," came the announcement. Dad suddenly grabbed our carry-ons with one hand and my arm with the other. "Let's go," he said. I was confused. "Aren't we Group 4? I asked, looking at our boarding passes. He didn't answer, just pulled me along toward the terminal exit instead of the boarding line. I looked back to see Lily trailing behind us, still sniffling, trying to keep up with Dad's quick pace. "Dad, where are we going?" "We're going to miss the plane," I said. "Dad, wait!" Lily called, her voice rising in panic as the distance between us increased. "Wait for me." Dad walked faster, his grip on my arm tightening. With horror, I realized what was happening. He was intentionally leaving Lily behind. "Dad, stop! We can't leave her!" I tried to pull away, but at 14 I was no match for his strength. "She'll learn a lesson about wasting people's time," he said, his voice frighteningly calm. In the parking garage, I broke down completely. "Please, Dad, please go back. She's only 8. She'll be so scared. She's in an airport full of security and staff. Someone will find her and page us. By then, she'll understand the consequences of her actions. Dad, this is crazy. We have to go back, I sobbed, refusing to get in the car. Dad's expression turned dangerous. Get in the car, Megan. Now. Unless you want to learn the same lesson. Terrified and sobbing, I got in. As we drove away, I turned to look back at the terminal, imagining little Lily alone inside, confused and scared, wondering why her family had abandoned her. The image still haunts me to this day. The drive home was the longest 20 minutes of my life. I couldn't stop crying, couldn't breathe through the panic of knowing Lily was alone in that massive airport. Dad drove in stony silence, occasionally glancing at me in the rearview mirror with something like disappointment, as if my reaction was the problem. She'll be fine, he finally said. Airport security will find her. They'll page us, we'll go back, and she'll have learned her lesson about making people wait. She's 8 years old, I screamed, finding courage in my desperation. She doesn't deserve this. Mom would hate you for this. At the mention of Mom, Dad's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel, but he said nothing. While he was focused on driving, I pulled out my phone and called the one person I knew would help, Grandma Patricia in San Francisco, whom we were supposed to be flying to see that day. Grandma, I whispered when she answered. Dad left Lily alone at O'Hare Airport. He just left her there because she took too long in the bathroom. He did what? Patricia's voice sharpened with disbelief. We were at Gate B-17, American Airlines to San Francisco. He just walked away and made me come with him. She's all alone. Please help her. I'm calling the airport security right now, Megan. And then I'm calling the police. Stay on the line with me. I heard her make the calls, her voice shifting from shocked to authoritative as she explained the situation to airport authorities. Then she called the Chicago police, reporting child abandonment. I kept the phone hidden, terrified of Dad discovering what I'd done. 30 minutes after leaving the airport, Dad's phone rang. His face changed as he listened to whoever was on the line. There must be some misunderstanding, he said smoothly. My daughter wandered off while I was checking our bags. Of course I'm concerned. We're on our way back right now. After hanging up, he turned to me, his eyes cold. The police are involved. Remember, Lily wandered off. Do you understand me? I nodded, too afraid to contradict him, but silently thanking Grandma Patricia for acting so quickly. When we returned to the airport, 2 police officers and an airport security officer were waiting with Lily in a small office. Her face was blotchy from crying, and when she saw us, she ran to me, ignoring Dad completely. You left me, she sobbed into my shoulder. You and Daddy just left me. I'm so sorry, Lily, I whispered, holding her tight. I tried to stop him. I'm so sorry. One officer took Dad aside while another gently questioned me. I was torn between fear of my father and the need to tell the truth. My sister needed to use the bathroom, I explained shakily. It took longer than Dad wanted. When we got to the gate, he got really angry and just walked away. He made me come with him. He said Lily needed to learn a lesson about wasting time. The officer's expression remained professional, but I saw something harden in his eyes as he took notes. The airport has security footage of all terminals, the security officer informed Dad. We've already reviewed it. Dad's facade cracked slightly. She was never in any danger. I was teaching her a lesson about responsibility. By abandoning an 8-year-old child in one of the busiest airports in America, the police officer asked incredulously. Sir, we're looking at potential child endangerment charges here. Child Protective Services has been notified. Dad's face paled. For the first time, I think he realized the seriousness of what he'd done. Meanwhile, I was still on the phone with Grandma Patricia, who had been listening to everything. I'm booking the next flight to Chicago, she told me. I'll be there tonight. Put the officer on the phone. I handed my phone to the female officer, who listened intently before saying, Yes, ma'am. We'll make sure the girls are safe until you arrive. We were taken to stay with our neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, who had been our occasional babysitter since Mom died. Dad was kept at the police station for further questioning. I don't understand why Daddy left me, Lily kept saying, clutching her stuffed rabbit that thankfully had been in her backpack. Was he going to come back for me? I didn't know how to answer. The truth was too painful, and lies wouldn't help. Word spread quickly in our neighborhood. I overheard Mrs. Johnson on the phone. Can you believe it? Left his 8-year-old at the airport because she took too long in the bathroom. The poor children. By evening, Dad had been released pending investigation, but wasn't allowed to take us home. He called Mrs. Johnson's house, demanding to speak to us. The girls are resting, Robert, she said firmly. Their grandmother will be here soon, and I think it's best if you give them some space tonight. Later that night, I heard him arguing with someone on our front lawn, his voice rising. They're my daughters. This is ridiculous. Sir, you need to leave now, or we'll have to take you in for violating the temporary order, came another voice, presumably a police officer's. Lily had nightmares that night, waking up screaming that she was lost and no one could find her. I crawled into bed with her, holding her until she fell back asleep, promising I would never, ever leave her alone. Grandma Patricia arrived just after midnight, her face lined with travel fatigue but her eyes clear with purpose. She hugged us both for a long time before saying, I'm taking you home with me, both of you. Dad won't let us go, I said. Her expression hardened in a way that reminded me of Mom when she was truly angry, a rare but formidable sight. After what he's done, Robert doesn't get a say anymore. The next morning, Grandma Patricia took us to the courthouse, where she filed for emergency custody. Dad showed up with a lawyer, looking tired but defiant. It was the first time we'd seen him since the airport, and Lily hid behind me, refusing to even look at him. This is an overreaction to a parenting decision, Dad's lawyer argued before the judge. Mr. Carter was simply trying to teach his younger daughter about consequences. The judge, an older woman with steel gray hair, peered at Dad over her glasses. Mr. Carter, abandoning a child in an international airport isn't a parenting decision. It's child endangerment, potentially child abuse, and shows a concerning lack of judgment. I had every intention of returning for her, Dad insisted. After driving away with your other minor child? The security footage doesn't support your claim, sir. I'll never forget the judge's words when she granted temporary custody to Grandma Patricia. The purpose of discipline is to teach, not to terrorize. What lesson did you think your 8-year-old would learn from being abandoned in a crowded airport, Mr. Carter? Other than that, she can't trust her father to keep her safe. Dad's face flushed with anger, but for once, he had no response. The judge ordered supervised visitation for Dad and mandated that Lily and I could temporarily relocate to San Francisco with our grandmother while the case proceeded. Dad was furious, threatening to fight the decision, but the judge was unmoved. Your lucky criminal charges haven't been filed yet, Mr. Carter. I strongly suggest you reflect on your actions and consider what's truly best for your daughters. If you've ever been caught in a family custody battle, you know how it tears at the very fabric of what you thought was secure. Here we were, packing our things while Dad watched from the doorway. Court officer beside him, the familiar becoming strange in an instant. I'd love to hear your experiences with unexpected family changes in the comments. Did anyone else have their world turned upside down in a single day? The move to San Francisco happened quickly. Grandma Patricia's home was nothing like our house in Chicago. It was smaller, cozier, in a neighborhood where houses stood shoulder to shoulder instead of being separated by manicured lawns. But it felt safer than any place I'd been since Mom died. This was your mother's room when she was growing up, Patricia told us, showing us a modest bedroom with 2 twin beds. I've kept some of her things. I thought you might want to see them. In a cedar chest, at the foot of one bed, were photo albums, journals, and keepsakes from Mom's childhood and teenage years. Dad had packed away most of Mom's things after she died, claiming it was healthier to move on. Now, Lily and I discovered parts of our mother we never knew existed, her handwriting bringing her voice back to us in ways that made us both laugh and cry. Mom was on the debate team, I marveled, looking at a photo of her holding a trophy. She had curly hair like me, Lily exclaimed over a beach photo. Patricia smiled sadly. Elizabeth was so vibrant, so full of life. After she married Robert, she changed, became quieter, more careful. I worried about her, but she insisted she was happy. This revelation hit me hard. Had Dad controlled Mom the way he tried to control us? Meanwhile, the legal battle intensified. Dad hired an expensive lawyer and filed counter motions, claiming Patricia had poisoned us against him. He demanded we return to Chicago immediately. Your father's fighting hard, Patricia's lawyer, Miss Chen, explained to us. But the airport incident gives us strong grounds. The judge has ordered psychological evaluations for all of you. The evaluation process was grueling. I spent hours with a child psychologist, explaining our life with Dad, the rigid rules, the harsh punishments, how different things had been when Mom was alive. Lily's sessions were shorter but more emotional, often ending with her in tears. The psychologist's report was damning. It documented Lily's newly developed separation, anxiety, nightmares, and fear of public places, all directly linked to the airport abandonment. It noted my anxiety, hypervigilance, and unhealthy sense of responsibility for my sister's well-being. Robert Carter exhibits narcissistic tendencies and an authoritarian parenting style that has created an environment of fear rather than security, the report concluded. The children display symptoms consistent with emotional abuse. When this report was submitted to the court, Dad's parents, my paternal grandparents, finally got involved. They'd always been distant figures who sent birthday cards and Christmas gifts but rarely visited. Now they rallied behind Dad, claiming Patricia was exaggerating the situation to steal their grandchildren. Robert is strict, but he's a good father, my grandfather insisted in a letter to the court. One mistake shouldn't erase years of providing for his children. The family split widened. Mom's siblings supported Patricia, while Dad's family defended him. Distant relatives I barely knew took sides, sending messages of support or condemnation. Our family drama became the topic of whispered conversations and strained holiday phone calls. Through it all, the financial strain was evident. Patricia was retired, living on a modest pension and savings. Dad's lawyer fees were mounting, and he began missing mortgage payments on our Chicago home. The child support he was ordered to pay often came late, if at all. He claims I kidnapped you both, Patricia explained when I asked why the checks weren't coming. He's using financial pressure as another form of control. I learned that Mom had received a substantial settlement from her life insurance and a medical malpractice suit related to her delayed cancer diagnosis. The money had been meant for our college funds, but Dad had control of the accounts. Now, those funds were in dispute too. Your mother wanted that money to secure your futures, Patricia said. We're fighting to protect it. The most difficult part was the supervised visits with Dad. Twice a month, we'd meet him in a family counseling center in San Francisco. A neutral third party always present. Dad tried to act normal, asking about school and bringing small gifts. But there was an underlying tension that never dissipated. When are you coming home? He'd ask, as if our life with Patricia was just a temporary arrangement. We are home, Lily would reply stubbornly, rarely making eye contact with him. During one particularly tense visit, Dad lost his temper when Lily refused to hug him goodbye. This is what your grandmother has done. Turned my own children against me. The supervisor immediately ended the visit, ushering us out while Dad continued raging. In the car afterward, Lily was quiet for a long time before asking, was Dad always like this? Even when Mom was alive? No, I said, trying to be honest. He was stricter than Mom, but not like this. After she died, something changed. I don't remember him being nice, she said softly. Not ever. The realization that Lily had no positive memories of our father broke my heart. Whatever good there might have been had been completely overshadowed by years of fear and one terrible act of abandonment. As the months passed, Dad's interest in fighting the custody battle seemed to wane. His calls became less frequent, his legal filings more perfunctory. Finally, his lawyer contacted Miss Chen with a settlement offer. Patricia would get primary custody, Dad would have holiday visitation, and he would pay a reduced amount of child support. He's giving up? I asked. surprised, and oddly hurt despite everything. He's cutting his losses, Miss Chen explained. The psychological reports are damaging. The airport incident is indefensible, and the legal fees are draining his resources. It should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt like another abandonment. Dad was choosing to let us go rather than fight for a healthier relationship. Somehow, that hurt almost as much as what he'd done at the airport. Our first year in San Francisco was a period of adjustment and slow healing. Starting at new schools mid-year brought its own challenges. I was a sophomore in high school, trying to navigate unfamiliar social groups while carrying the emotional baggage of everything that had happened. Lily had it harder in some ways. Third grade should have been about making friends and having fun, but her trauma from the airport abandonment manifested in clingy behavior and panic attacks. She couldn't bear to be apart from me or Patricia, which made school especially difficult. "What if you don't come back?" she would ask every morning, her small hands clutching mine at the school gate. "I will always come back for you, Lily," I promised. Always. Patricia enrolled us both in therapy. My therapist, Dr. Abernathy, helped me understand that I'd taken on an unhealthy level of responsibility for Lily's well-being. "You're her sister, not her parent," she reminded me gently. "It's okay to be a teenager. It's okay to have your own life." But having my own life felt impossible when Lily needed me so much. I turned down party invitations, skipped school events, and rarely brought friends home, all to make sure Lily felt secure. It was a role I'd grown accustomed to since Mom died, and breaking the pattern proved difficult. Patricia's parenting style was the opposite of Dad's. Where he had been rigid and punitive, she was flexible and understanding. Rather than punishment, she emphasized communication and natural consequences. At first, this approach confused both of us. "Aren't you going to ground me?" I asked once after coming home past curfew. Patricia looked surprised. "Were you unsafe?" "No, the movie ran late, and I forgot to call." "Then next time, check the running time beforehand and call if there's a change of plans. Being grounded wouldn't teach you that, would it?" This reasonable approach was so foreign that it took months for us to stop walking on eggshells, expecting harsh consequences for minor infractions. One of the most healing aspects of living with Patricia was reconnecting with our mother's memory. Dad had packed away photos, removed mementos, and rarely spoke of Mom after she died. It was as if he wanted to erase her. But Patricia's home was filled with Elizabeth's presence, from photographs on the walls to stories shared over dinner. "Your mother made this recipe," Patricia would say, teaching us to make Mom's favorite lemon chicken. She always added extra garlic. Or she'd point out personality traits. "You have your mother's laugh, Megan," and "Lily, that determined look is pure Elizabeth." Through these stories and shared memories, Mom became real to us again, not just a painful absence, but a continuing presence in our lives. Meanwhile, Dad's communication became increasingly sporadic. The weekly video calls ordered by the court often found him distracted or irritable. Sometimes he'd cancel at the last minute, claiming work emergencies. Each cancellation devastated Lily anew, though she tried to hide it. "It's okay," she'd say, shrugging with forced casualness. I didn't really want to talk to him anyway. When Thanksgiving approached, the court agreement stipulated that we would fly to Chicago to spend it with Dad. Patricia prepared us carefully, helping us pack and reassuring us that we'd be back home with her soon. "Remember, you can call me any time," she said, day or night. The visit was a disaster from the start. Dad's house felt sterile and unfamiliar after months away. He'd redecorated, removing even more traces of our previous life there. He'd also invited his parents, creating an awkward family dynamic where everyone pretended nothing was wrong. The breaking point came during Thanksgiving dinner, when Dad criticized Lily for taking too much food and then not eating it all. "This is why you've gotten pudgy," he said sharply. "You waste food, and you don't listen to limits." Lily, who had been making real progress in therapy, immediately shut down. She pushed her plate away and asked to be excused, tears in her eyes. When I followed her upstairs, Dad called after me. "Don't coddle her, Megan. She needs to learn. She needs to feel safe," I snapped back, surprising myself with my boldness. something you never understood. We flew back to San Francisco the next day, cutting the visit short. Dad didn't fight it, though he called Patricia afterward to complain about our attitude problems. Christmas was supposed to bring another visit, but Dad failed to book the plane tickets as promised. When Patricia called to confirm the arrangements, he claimed to have been too busy with work, promising to make it up to them later. "He forgot us," Lily said matter-of-factly when Patricia gently broke the news. Again, but rather than dwelling on Dad's failure, Patricia helped us create new traditions. We baked cookies using Mom's recipes, volunteered at a local shelter, and spent Christmas Eve looking at holiday lights throughout the neighborhood. "Family isn't just who you're born to," Patricia told us. "It's who shows up for you, who makes you feel loved and safe." That Christmas, surrounded by the warmth of Patricia's home and the memory of our mother, I began to understand what real family love felt like, perhaps for the first time since Mom died. As months passed, Patricia encouraged us to express our feelings through creative outlets. I started journaling, filling notebooks with my thoughts, fears, and hopes. Lily discovered a talent for drawing, creating vivid pictures that often depicted her emotions in ways she couldn't verbalize. One particular drawing broke my heart. A small girl sitting alone on an airport bench, surrounded by towering, faceless adults. The loneliness it conveyed was palpable. "That's how I felt when Daddy left me," Lily explained. "Like everyone else had someone, but I was invisible." Her therapist used these drawings as tools to help Lily process her trauma. Slowly, the airport scenes in her art became less frequent, replaced by pictures of our new life. Patricia's garden, our school, the three of us together. I joined a support group for teenagers from difficult family situations, finding solace in sharing experiences with peers who understood without judgment. For the first time, I heard other kids describe family dynamics similar to what we'd experienced with Dad. "My mom's like that," said one girl after I described Dad's controlling behavior. "Nothing's ever good enough. You're always walking on eggshells." "My dad left us at a gas station once because we were arguing in the back seat," shared another boy. "He drove away and didn't come back for an hour. I was 8. These stories didn't erase our pain, but they normalized it somehow, making us feel less alone, less like the bizarre exception to happy families. By spring, we had established genuine friendships in San Francisco. Lily had a best friend named Maya who lived down the street, and I had found my place with a group of art and drama students who accepted my complicated family story without judgment. Dad's communications grew increasingly infrequent. He often missed the scheduled video calls, sometimes texting hours later with brief excuses. Each missed call affected us less, a sad testament to how our expectations of him had diminished. "Do you think he even misses us?" Lily asked one night as I tucked her into bed. "I think he misses the idea of us," I answered carefully. "The daughters he wanted us to be, not who we actually are." She nodded thoughtfully. "I'm glad we have Grandma Patricia. She likes who we actually are." In that simple observation, Lily captured the fundamental difference between our father and the woman who had become our real parent, the one who showed up every day, who created safety instead of fear, who celebrated our true selves instead of trying to mold us into something else. By the end of our first year in San Francisco, the nightmares that had plagued Lily since the airport incident had decreased significantly. She could go to school without panic attacks, though she still needed reassurance that someone would definitely be there to pick her up afterward. I was sleeping better too, no longer lying awake worrying about protecting Lily or anticipating Dad's next outburst. For the first time in years, I felt like a normal teenager with normal problems, not the co-parent of a traumatized child or the buffer between a controlling father and a vulnerable sister. We were healing, slowly but surely, learning to trust in consistency and kindness after years of walking on eggshells. The airport abandonment had shattered our family, but from those broken pieces, we were building something new, something stronger and healthier than what had come before. 3 years passed, bringing changes none of us could have predicted. I was now 17, a high school senior with good grades and cautious dreams of college. Lily, at 11, had blossomed into a talented artist with a small circle of loyal friends. The airport incident, while never forgotten, had receded from a constant presence to an ugly memory that occasionally resurfaced in difficult moments. Our life with Patricia had settled into comfortable routines: family dinners every night, weekend trips to museums or parks, movie nights where we took turns choosing films, the kind of normal, stable family life that had once seemed impossible. Dad remained a peripheral figure, his presence in our lives diminished to occasional phone calls and rare visits. His career had taken a downturn after the airport incident and subsequent investigation. The company where he'd been an executive had quietly pushed him into a lesser role, away from client-facing positions. The family man image he'd cultivated had been irreparably damaged when news of the airport abandonment circulated among his colleagues. During our last video call, I noticed the background wasn't his home office, but what appeared to be a much smaller apartment. When I asked about the move, he dismissed it as temporary restructuring due to his department's downsizing. "The economy's tough right now," he explained vaguely, "but I'll be back on my feet soon." His bitterness toward Patricia had only intensified over the years. He referred to her as that woman and frequently implied she had orchestrated everything to steal us from him. "Your grandmother turned you against me," he said during one particularly tense call. "You were happy before she interfered." Lily, who had been quietly drawing during the call, looked up sharply. "No, we weren't," she said simply. "We were scared all the time." Dad had no response to that truth. Our relatively peaceful existence was shaken when Patricia was diagnosed with early-stage breast cancer. The news hit us like a physical blow, resurrecting painful memories of Mom's illness and death. But unlike Mom's late-stage diagnosis, Patricia's cancer had been caught early, and her prognosis was good. Still, the fear was overwhelming. Lily's nightmares returned, featuring hospitals and empty rooms. I found myself researching cancer treatments obsessively, as if knowledge could somehow control the outcome. "I'm not going anywhere," Patricia assured us, her voice firm despite her obvious fatigue after treatments. "This is different from what happened with your mother." But Lily was inconsolable at times, terrified of losing another mother figure. "First Mom, then Dad left us, and now Grandma's sick," she sobbed one night. "Why does everyone leave?" I held her, wishing I had better answers. "Patricia isn't leaving," I promised. "And I'm not leaving either. Not ever." The practical reality of Patricia's illness meant increased expenses at a time when our financial situation was already strained. Dad's child support payments, erratic from the beginning, had become even more unreliable as his own financial situation deteriorated. At 17, I got a part-time job at a local bookstore to help with household expenses. Between school, work, and helping care for Patricia during her treatment, I had little time for the normal teenage activities I'd only recently started to enjoy. But unlike my caregiving role with Lily after Mom died, this felt like a choice, not an obligation forced upon me by Dad's emotional absence. Patricia repeatedly urged me to reduce my hours, insisting they were managing fine financially, but I wanted to contribute, to be part of the team that kept our small family afloat during this difficult time. The court battles to enforce Dad's support payments dragged on, draining more of Patricia's limited resources. Her lawyer, Miss Chen, worked at reduced rates but couldn't do everything pro bono. "The system is designed to exhaust people into giving up," Miss Chen explained during one particularly frustrating meeting. "Your father knows that. He's counting on your grandmother running out of money or energy to fight." Dad's increasingly rare communications took on a desperate edge. He lost his job entirely and moved to an even smaller apartment in a less desirable neighborhood. During one late-night call, his words slightly slurred. He railed against the injustice of his situation. "I provided for you girls for years," he said bitterly. "I gave you everything, and this is the thanks I get. Left for that woman, paying money I don't have, while you act like I'm the villain." I didn't argue. There seemed no point in rehashing the airport abandonment or the years of fear that preceded it. Dad's narrative of victimhood had calcified into his reality, impervious to facts or our experiences. The breaking point came when I turned 17 and decided to legally change my last name from Carter to Walsh, my mother's maiden name. The decision wasn't made in anger or as punishment, but as a positive choice to honor Mom and Patricia, the women who had shown me what real love looked like. When Lily heard about my decision, she immediately wanted to do the same. "I want to be a Walsh too," she insisted. Like Mom and Grandma, Dad's reaction was explosive. He called at midnight, clearly intoxicated, raging about our betrayal and spitting on the Carter name. "After everything I've done for you," he shouted loud enough that I had to hold the phone away from my ear. "You ungrateful, spoiled brats, your mother would be ashamed." That was the final straw. "Mom would be ashamed of you," I said quietly, "for abandoning an 8-year-old at an airport, for making us afraid all the time, for being the kind of father we'd rather not share a name with." I hung up, blocking his number after 3 years of making excuses for his behavior. The threatening calls continued, now directed at Patricia's home phone. Late-night rants, vague threats about taking back what's mine, accusations that became increasingly unhinged. After consulting with Miss Chen, Patricia filed for a restraining order, which was quickly granted given the documented history and current threatening behavior. Dad didn't contest it. Perhaps he finally recognized how far he had fallen, or maybe he had simply run out of fight. Either way, his communication stopped entirely after that. My high school graduation ceremony was bittersweet. Patricia was there, looking thin but determined, having just finished her last round of radiation. Lily sat beside her, holding her hand and beaming with pride as I walked across the stage. The seats reserved for Dad and his parents remained empty, though they had been invited as a gesture of reconciliation. As I applied to colleges, the financial reality of Patricia's medical bills and our limited resources meant staying local. I won a partial scholarship to San Francisco State University, allowing me to live at home and continue helping with expenses while pursuing a degree in psychology, inspired partly by my own therapeutic journey. The girl who had once walked on eggshells around her father, who had assumed responsibility for her sister's emotional well-being at the age of 10, was becoming a young woman with purpose, determined to understand and perhaps someday help others navigate family trauma. Looking back at those 3 transformative years, I could see how completely our family dynamic had changed. Dad, once the authoritarian center of our universe, had become a cautionary tale, a source of occasional sadness rather than ongoing fear. Patricia, once a distant figure, known only through Mom's occasional stories, had become our rock, our safe harbor. And Lily and I, once isolated in our father's strict household, had found not only each other in a deeper way, but a community of friends and supporters who had helped us redefine what family truly means. The airport abandonment, meant to teach Lily a cruel lesson about punctuality, had indeed taught us all a lesson, but not the one Dad intended. It had shown us that real family isn't about control or fear or rigid expectations. It's about showing up, day after day, in good times and bad. It's about creating safety instead of threat, acceptance instead of constant judgment. It's about love that doesn't have to be earned by perfect behavior or lost through normal human mistakes. These were the lessons we carried forward as we continued to build our lives, lessons that would serve us well in the challenges still to come. At 25, I had completed my master's degree in clinical psychology with a specialization in childhood trauma. Working at a family counseling center in Oakland, I used my personal experiences alongside my professional training to help children navigate family crises and emotional abuse. Lily, now 19, was studying art therapy at the local community college while working part-time at a children's art studio. Her own healing journey had inspired her career choice, particularly her experience using art to process the airport abandonment and its aftermath. Patricia, thankfully in remission for several years, had slowed down but remained the heart of our small family. The after effects of cancer treatment had left her with chronic fatigue and occasional health scares, but her spirit remained undimmed. We hadn't heard from Dad in years. The restraining order had expired long ago, but he had made no attempts to contact us. Occasionally, I would search his name online, finding little beyond outdated professional profiles and a few social media accounts that appeared abandoned. It seemed he had vanished from our lives as completely as he had once threatened to vanish from Lily's life at O'Hare Airport. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday, the call came that would bring our family story full circle. "Megan? It's Karen," said the voice on the other end. It took me a moment to place it. Aunt Karen was Dad's sister, someone I hadn't spoken to since before the airport incident. We had never been close, and she had sided firmly with Dad during the custody battle. "Aunt Karen," I replied cautiously, "this is unexpected." "I know, and I'm sorry to call out of the blue," she said, her voice lacking the defensive edge I remembered. "It's about your father. He's not well, Megan." The news came in clinical terms. Early onset Parkinson's disease, diagnosed 6 months earlier, now progressing more rapidly than doctors had initially predicted. Dad was unable to work, his tremors making even basic self-care challenging. "He's alone, Megan," Karen said quietly. "His friends have drifted away. He can barely afford his medication. He's too proud to ask for help, but he needs it. He wants to see you and Lily." My first instinct was protective. Keep Lily away from him, shield her from the man who had inflicted such trauma. But beneath that reaction was something more complex, a mixture of anger, pity, and the uncomfortable recognition that karma had indeed caught up with Robert Carter. "I'll think about it," I told Karen noncommittally. "I need to talk to Lily and our grandmother." After hanging up, I sat in my car for a long time, remembering the father who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating, trying to reconcile that image with the ill, isolated man Karen had described. That evening, I told Patricia and Lily about the call. Patricia listened without comment, her expression thoughtful. Lily's reaction was immediate and visceral. "No," she said firmly. "I don't want to see him. I don't care if he's sick." "You don't have to," I assured her. "No one would force you." "Then why are we even talking about this?" she demanded. "He abandoned me at an airport when I was 8. He threatened Grandma. He never even apologized." She was right, of course. Dad had never acknowledged the harm he'd caused, never sought forgiveness in any meaningful way. Why should we extend compassion where none had been shown? Yet the situation nagged at me. In my work with traumatized families, I had seen how healing could sometimes come from unexpected directions, how completion sometimes required facing the very source of old wounds. I scheduled an appointment with my own therapist, Dr. Abernathy, who had guided me through adolescence and now occasionally helped me navigate complex adult challenges. "You're not responsible for your father's welfare," she reminded me during our session, "but I wonder if seeing him might offer you something. Some kind of closure, perhaps." "What if it just opens old wounds?" I asked. "That's always a risk," she acknowledged. "But you're not the vulnerable teenager you were the last time you saw him. You have boundaries now, and the skills to maintain them." After much thought, I decided to meet with Dad alone first, to assess the situation before potentially involving Lily. Patricia supported my decision with her usual wisdom. "Sometimes the most healing thing is to see that what once hurt you no longer has power over you," she said. "But be careful with your heart, Megan." The assisted living facility, where Dad now resided, was in a rundown area of Sacramento, a far cry from the affluent Chicago suburb where we'd grown up. The building was clean but institutional, the kind of place people end up when options and resources are limited. Nothing prepared me for the shock of seeing Robert Carter, once so imposing and intimidating, reduced to a trembling figure in a wheelchair. At 53, he looked 70, his face gaunt, his once commanding posture collapsed inward. When he saw me, a complicated series of emotions crossed his face. Surprise, shame, and something that might have been relief. "Megan," he said, his voice thin but recognizable. "You came." "I came," I agreed, sitting in the chair opposite him. An uncomfortable silence stretched between us, years of unspoken hurt and anger creating an almost physical barrier. "You look like your mother," he finally said, "more than I remembered." "I'll take that as a compliment," he nodded, a slight tremor running through him. "How's Lily?" "She's good, studying art therapy, still drawing, like she was always trying to do when you." I stopped, the memory of him throwing away her art supplies for some minor infraction rising unbidden. "When I was too hard on her, he finished, surprising me with the admission. On both of you. I hadn't expected any acknowledgement, however oblique. It threw me off balance. Karen says you're a psychologist now, he continued. Working with traumatized children, yes. He winced slightly, perhaps at the implication. I guess I gave you plenty of research material. The bitter attempt at humor fell flat, and he seemed to realize it, looking away. Why did you want to see me, Dad? I asked directly. After all this time, his hands trembled more visibly as he struggled to find words. I've had a lot of time to think. This disease, it forces perspective. I was wrong, Megan, about so many things, but especially about that day at the airport. I should never have left Lily there. It was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever heard from him, but it felt insufficient given the magnitude of what he'd done, the years of emotional abuse that had preceded and followed that one dramatic act. That's what you're sorry for? Leaving Lily at O'Hare? What about everything else, Dad? The constant fear, the impossible standards, the way you turned on Patricia when she tried to help us. He seemed to shrink further into his chair. All of it, he whispered. I'm sorry for all of it. I was. I didn't know how to be a father without your mother. I thought discipline would keep you safe in a dangerous world. I thought I was teaching you to be strong. You taught us to be afraid, I corrected him. Of making mistakes, of being human, of you, he nodded, accepting this truth in a way the old Robert Carter never would have. I know. And now I'm afraid, Megan, I'm alone. The doctors say the disease is progressing faster than normal. Soon I won't be able to care for myself at all. And there it was, the reason for his sudden desire for reconciliation, for his belated recognition of past wrongs. Dad was experiencing his own greatest fear, abandonment when vulnerable. The man who had left an 8-year-old alone in an airport to teach her a lesson was now facing the prospect of being left alone in an institution dependent on the care of strangers. The irony was almost too perfect, a karmic symmetry that part of me wanted to savor. Yet looking at him, I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a complicated sadness for all that had been lost. What are you asking of me? I questioned, though I already knew the answer. I don't have anyone else, he admitted. Karen tries. But she lives in Florida, has her own health problems. I thought maybe we could try to be a family again, somehow. The audacity of the request should have angered me, but instead I felt a strange calm, a certainty about my own boundaries that had been hard-won through years of therapy and growth. I can help arrange proper care for you, I told him. I can visit sometimes. But I'm not moving you in with us, and I'm not becoming your caregiver. And Lily will make her own decision about whether she wants any contact at all. Relief and disappointment warred on his face. It wasn't the full reconciliation he'd hoped for, but it was more than he probably deserved. I understand, he said quietly. That's fair. More than fair. As I left the facility that day, I felt lighter somehow, as if seeing Dad diminished had finally released me from the last lingering fear of his power over my life. The monster of my childhood had been revealed as simply a flawed, failing human being, now facing the consequences of his own actions. I had expected to feel angry or vindicated seeing Dad brought low by illness and isolation. Instead, I felt something unexpected, compassion without forgetting, understanding without excusing. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, at least not yet, but it was the beginning of a different kind of freedom from the past. The decision about how to handle Dad's situation required a family meeting. Back at Patricia's house, I shared everything with her and Lily. Dad's condition, his request, and my own conflicted feelings. We don't owe him anything, Lily said immediately, her voice firm but not angry. Not after everything he did. Patricia, ever the voice of wisdom, posed a question that made us both pause. What response would bring you the most peace? Not now, but in the years to come. It was Lily who eventually surprised us with her suggestion. I don't want to see him, she said, but I could write him a letter. Tell him how what he did affected me. Not to hurt him, but so maybe he'll understand. So maybe he won't think it was just one bad day at an airport. That's very brave, Patricia noted, squeezing Lily's hand. It's not for him, Lily clarified. It's for me. Dr. Santiago says unprocessed emotions are like poison. Maybe this is how I let some of it out. Patricia's eyes filled with tears. Your mother would be so proud of the women you've both become. In the end, we reached a family decision that honored everyone's boundaries. I would arrange proper medical care for Dad, making sure his needs were met without taking on the burden of direct caregiving. I would visit monthly, maintaining a limited relationship. Lily would write her letter, but decide later if she wanted any direct contact. Forgiveness isn't about saying what happened was okay, Patricia reminded us. It's about not letting the past control your future. It's a gift you give yourselves, not him. With that framework, we moved forward. I worked with social services to ensure Dad had access to all available resources and support. Lily spent weeks crafting her letter, working with her therapist to find words for feelings she'd carried since childhood. When she finally finished it, she asked me to deliver it on my next visit. I want to know how he reacts, she admitted. Just tell me the truth, even if it's bad. The letter was several pages long, written in Lily's artistic hand, occasionally illustrated with small sketches in the margins. She had never shown me its contents, considering it a private communication, and I respected that boundary. When I gave it to Dad during my next visit, he seemed genuinely surprised. Lily wrote to me? He asked, his trembling hands carefully opening the envelope. Don't expect a reconciliation, I warned him. This is her processing what happened, not an invitation. He nodded, adjusting his reading glasses. I sat quietly as he read, watching the emotions play across his face, defensive at first, then pained, and finally, something like genuine remorse. When he reached what appeared to be a drawing near the end, tears spilled down his cheeks. She drew the airport, he whispered. How small she felt. How scared. For perhaps the first time, Dad seemed to truly grasp the impact of what he had done, not just the legal consequences or social judgment, but the profound emotional trauma he had inflicted on his child. I never thought, he began, then stopped. That's not true. I didn't let myself think about how she felt. I was so focused on the lesson I thought she needed to learn. The lesson she actually learned was that she couldn't trust her father to keep her safe, I said, not unkindly, but truthfully. That's a hard lesson for an 8-year-old. He carefully folded the letter, his hands shaking not just from his illness now. Will you thank her for me? Tell her. Tell her I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not just because I'm sick now, but because I understand, finally, what I did to her. To both of you. I promised to relay the message, though I made no guarantees about Lily's response. Over the following months, a careful, limited relationship developed. Dad's condition deteriorated more rapidly than expected, necessitating a move to a nursing facility with round-the-clock care. I visited regularly, sometimes bringing updates about Lily or photos of her artwork, which he always received with visible emotion. 6 months after receiving Lily's letter, Dad asked if we might all meet, just once, including Patricia. Before I can't communicate properly anymore, he explained, his speech already showing signs of the decline to come. I brought the request home, expecting immediate refusal, especially from Lily. Instead, after much thought, she surprised me again. One dinner, she said. In a restaurant, not his place or ours. Neutral ground. Patricia agreed to come as well, her own act of grace toward the man who had once threatened and maligned her. The dinner was as awkward and painful as might be expected, yet also cathartic in ways none of us had anticipated. We met at a quiet restaurant halfway between our home and Dad's facility, choosing an early hour when few other diners would be present. Dad arrived with a caregiver who helped him get settled before discreetly moving to another table, close enough to assist if needed, but giving us privacy. His decline was even more pronounced than when I'd last seen him, his speech sometimes slurring, his movements increasingly uncoordinated. Lily, seeing him for the first time in 7 years, seemed shocked by the change. The intimidating figure of her childhood was gone, replaced by this frail man who needed help cutting his food. Conversation was stilted at first, careful pleasantries that skirted the deeper issues. But gradually, with Patricia occasionally facilitating when tensions rose, We began to speak more honestly about the past and present. I brought something, Lily said suddenly, reaching into her bag. She pulled out a portfolio of drawings, spreading several across the table. These are from my therapy sessions over the years. My journey processing what happened. The artwork was powerful, a chronological record of her healing. The earliest pieces showed a small figure alone in cavernous spaces, overwhelmed by absence and abandonment. Later drawings introduced other figures, representing Patricia, me, her friends, and therapists, surrounding the once isolated child. The most recent pieces showed a young woman standing tall, scars visible but no longer defining her. Dad looked at each drawing carefully, his medical tremors occasionally causing tears to spill over. "You're so talented," he said softly. "I should have encouraged that instead of punishing it." "I didn't show these to hurt you," Lily clarified. "I wanted you to see that I'm okay now, despite everything. Not because of anything you did, but because of the people who actually took care of me." It was a powerful statement, neither vengeful nor conciliatory, simply truthful. Patricia, who had remained largely quiet, spoke then. "Robert, you and I have our history, and it's not a pleasant one. But I want you to know that Elizabeth's daughters have become extraordinary women, with compassion and strength that would make their mother proud. You gave them what I couldn't," he acknowledged. "Security, acceptance, love without conditions. That's what children need," she said simply. "Not harsh lessons or perfect obedience, just the knowledge that they're loved exactly as they are." As Dad's health continued to decline over the following months, our tentative reconciliation remained limited but genuine. I continued my regular visits. Lily sent occasional cards or emails but maintained her distance, a boundary I fully supported. The final irony of our family saga came when Dad required full-time nursing care, completely dependent on others for his most basic needs. The man who had once abandoned his child to teach her about responsibility now had to surrender all self-sufficiency, accepting help for everything from eating to bathing. "It's humbling," he admitted during one of my visits, his speech now difficult to understand without careful attention. "Being so helpless, counting on people showing up, people you can't control." "That's what Lily felt that day at O'Hare," I observed. "Complete dependence on someone who might not come back." He nodded slowly, the parallel finally, fully understood. "I get it now," he said. "Too late, but I get it." Today, as I sit in my office at the Family Counseling Center where I now work, I often find myself drawing on these experiences when helping children navigate their own family traumas. The little girl sitting across from me now reminds me so much of Lily at that age, carrying wounds inflicted by those who should have protected her. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to take care of us don't know how," I tell her gently. "But that doesn't mean you won't find people who do. And it doesn't mean you won't be okay." I know this to be true because I've lived it, because Lily has lived it. The airport abandonment that once defined our family story has become just one chapter in a longer narrative of healing and growth. The karma that caught up with our father brought no satisfaction, only a complicated resolution that allowed all of us, in different ways, to finally move forward. If my journey has taught me anything, it's that family trauma doesn't have to define you forever. Sometimes the hardest lessons about trust and abandonment can lead to the greatest growth, especially when you find people who show you what real love looks like. Has your family experienced a moment that changed everything? I'd love to hear your stories of healing or how you navigated your own family challenges. Leave a comment below, subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share with someone who might need to hear that healing is possible, even after the deepest betrayals. Thank you for allowing me to share our story. And remember, sometimes the most important family is the one we build, not the one we're born into.